All right, one last look at your traffic and weather for your ride in on this Tuesday morning. Couple accidents to report. One at I-77 southbound before exit number 24. There is a right lane blocked. Another one at St. Andrews Road and Bush River Road. Another one at Platte Springs Road and South Lake Drive. And one more at Sunset Boulevard and Cromer Road. Today, some stray showers throughout the day. High of about 88. Tomorrow, cloudy with a high of 85. And a little bit of rain on Thursday with a high of 70. Currently 59 in Columbia here on the game. Oh, 9 o'clock on your Tuesday morning. Welcome in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you here. I'm in studio. Jack Veltri joining us on the road, quite literally, to Nashville. Are you actually on the way to Nashville right now? Still in the parking, still in the driveway? What's the update?
Well, I'm actually driving. I'm still in Clemson. I'm driving my brother and his buddies over to class.
Okay.
So I told him I'd give him a ride this morning. But,
I think that's fair considering they let you stay the night.
Yeah. And my brother let me crash in his bed. So that was.
So he slept on the floor.
No, he slept on a couch.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Yeah. So
that was kind of him.
I know. So we've gone from last week sleeping on the floor to this week we're sleeping on the bed. So. No, but we'll be on the road to Nashville here in probably about 5-10 minutes. Get some gas, get some ice, and then we're rocking and rolling, man.
I did do the liberty of calculating the total mileage you're going to be driving about the next week. Would you like to know how many miles you're going to drive?
Dude, it's going to be close to like 2,000 miles. It probably will far exceed anything you have written down. But let's hear it.
So just to be clear, because you drove from Columbia to Clemson last night, stayed with your brother, you're going to Nashville today. After Nashville, assuming Carolina gets bounced early, you're going to drive back to Fort Mill, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And then from Fort Mill, you're going to go to Gainesville.
Yes.
From Gainesville, you go to Kissimmee, and then Kissimmee back to Columbia. Did I get all that right?
Yes. There will probably be a little extra driving in there while I'm in Kissimmee. But yes, you're about right. So tack on about 200 extra miles to whatever you have there.
Well, the mileage I came up with was 1,876. So you're right on the number of about 2,000 miles when it's all said and done.
Oh, dude, we're easily going to have over 2,000 miles. It's my car is currently at a little over 20K miles, and I've had the car for a little over a year at this point. I will probably be at 22K miles by the end of this. I'll be shocked if it's anything less. It's going to be quite the week, man. I'm not going to be home till next Tuesday, so I am. It's really going to be a lot of driving this next week here.
Again, I commend you for the job that you do that allows you to see a lot of the country. You see, well, mainly the Southeast at least, but you get to you don't have to stay in one place very long. There's that.
Yeah, no, it's and sorry if you can hear anything in the background there. My car, anytime anyone takes off a seatbelt, it starts ringing. So, but yeah, man, no, it's going to be a lot traveling these next few days. So.
Well, for that and Jack's travels is going to be happening over the next week. I think that's a perfect transition into today's Sandstorm Pick-Me-Up.
Time to get hyped. Here's your 9 a.m. Sandstorm, sponsored by George Sink Injury Lawyers. Just call all nines.
It is time for your 9 a.m. Sandstorm Pick-Me-Up, brought to you by South Carolina's largest injury law firm, George Sink Injury Lawyers. Have you been hurt in the car or at work? Call George Sink now at 803-ALL-9s. Again, Jack is going to be on the road to Nashville here shortly to cover the men's basketball team, as they get set to play in the SEC men's tournament. They'll be in action in the late game tomorrow night, taking on the number 11 seed Oklahoma. Again, tip-off is scheduled for 9:30. It'll probably be closer to 9:45 or 9:50 because that's typically how these things go. So it's going to be a late night, and that could be where South Carolina's season comes to an end, though they did beat Oklahoma earlier on this year, and maybe they could play all the way until Thursday against Texas A&M, who is the number 9 overall seed. And kind of as expected, Jack, we're starting to see some speculation reports roll out that what we've been talking about the past couple of weeks of Lamont Paris likely returning to South Carolina seems closer to coming to fruition. Again, we don't have anything official yet from Jeremiah Donati or anything like that, but as I've kind of said, I feel like we've been softening the blow for people as of late because it seems like this is the likely outcome we're going to get regardless of what happens tomorrow in Nashville. Again,
it's the decision I feel like it's simpler than I think a lot of people realize. It's a huge, I don't want to say burden, but let's be honest. Let's call it for what it is. It kind of is a financial burden in a lot of ways that I just think you're trying to avoid right now. Now, again, I've said before, I think Lamont is a good coach. There's a reason why he was able to win 26 games 2 seasons ago and, do it on probably what at the time was a smaller budget than what he has now. But the reality of college basketball right now is, especially as a Power 4 SEC program, is you have to have money, and you got to be able to even the playing field, level the playing field. You've got to have enough money to compete, and firing LP is about a $12 million buyout, and then you have to move on from the assistants most likely. And then you're hiring a new coach, and then you're also probably guaranteed to have to give more NIL resources. Whereas if you just keep Lamont, then you're just increasing the NIL budget. So I think the option, given that LP has had success here before, I know it's not been pretty 3 of the last 4 seasons that he's been here. I think you're kind of stuck in a really bad spot because of that buyout, and I think it's just a lot easier to go ahead and just increase his NIL budget. Now, is that the right decision? I'm not sure. Well, time will tell. But I think it's realistically the only decision right now, just because you also have to work. You also have to consider the other sports in all of this. Like, there's no guarantee what's going to happen with baseball, even though they're playing a little bit better right now. SEC play gets going this weekend, so things could take a drastic change, and then you have to consider, oh, man, what are you doing with Paul Maneri? Football, who knows? I mean, it's a much different situation, but between basketball and baseball, let's put it this way, it's a lot easier to move on from baseball compared to LP just because the buyout is substantially different.
Yeah, it's a lot different, and again, there's a lot of baseball left to be played, but if things go sideways again this year for baseball, you could be in a situation where Paul Maneri might just choose to walk away to not, further hurt his legacy or anything like that, which that's a whole nother discussion than what depends on how baseball season obviously goes. But again, it's leaning towards Lamont Paris coming back. And much like football with, Coach Beamer, both Paris and Beamer go into this fall knowing they're in prove-it years, knowing it's either put up or shut up time, especially if you're going to add more resources to the basketball program, saying, hey, we're going to give you the money that's comparable to what a lot of the other teams in the SEC have. Go out there and get the talent and make something happen. Again, we do have to give Lamont Paris credit for that tournament appearance a couple years ago because they were operating still on a fraction of the budget of everybody else, and they got the evaluations right in that offseason. But at the other 3 years, they've obviously gotten it wrong. So did they just strike lightning? Or did lightning just strike with the talent that they brought in a couple years ago, or was that truly just a situation, or the other 3 years just a situation where Lamont Paris just truly got it wrong? And I think this upcoming off season and next season for basketball are really going to tell us a lot.
Yeah, and look, I'm sure there are a lot of fans that are just not. Again, it's not official, but yeah, I woke up this morning and I did see some stuff about it, and I'm sure we'll get official word here. Probably, you would hope by the end of this week we get something concrete. Once if the season does come to an end this week, we get a little bit of something a little bit more concrete. But yeah, look, I'm not going to say whether it's the right or wrong decision. All I'm going to say is the facts of the situation are it's very expensive to move on from a coach. It is not as simple as money grows on trees and it'll be smooth sailing to pay him. Now, granted, you don't have to pay LP his buyout all at once. It is over time, but again, when you're in, I mean, you're really setting yourself up to be in. Truly, it feels like financial hell just because you got the baseball situation to worry about. You got basketball to worry about. Shoot, I mean, if football has another bad year, I don't know what you do there. I mean, there's just a lot going on right now, but you're just hoping increasing the budget will end up leading to better results. And I think 2 years ago, it was the perfect storm of, we've seen it. I mean, not that the players have been bad that he's recruited over the last 2 years, but they haven't made anywhere near the same impact that guys like Talon Cooper, BJ Mack, when you brought Michi in, like guys like that have just been so impactful for South Carolina, Miles Studi, that you really just haven't hit the same in the transfer portal since. And the results on the floor tell you that. Like, the results have been a little bit too inconsistent the last 2 years, whereas everything really just came together perfectly 2 years ago. Now, I mean, you're basically 1 for 4 so far in terms of transfer portal off seasons where those pickups have hit. We'll see what happens if it gets to a year 5, but if it's me and I'm bringing LP back, something has to change in the evaluation process of the talent you're bringing in. I know it's a quick, really, sped up process with the portal, and it's kind of like speed dating in a lot of realms, but I've said before, I don't know if it's whether you need to bring someone else in to kind of help evaluate this talent, but something's got to change in that process, I think, to get better results.
Well, and I think it's going to be interesting. And again, we don't know what that number for resources would be, but we would hope it would be comparable to a lot of other teams in the SEC. And do you put yourself in a situation where you can go out and say, land a $1 million point guard or something like that? Because, again, we've talked about this the last couple of years. They've lacked that quality at point guard that Talon Cooper was so great at that year they went to the NCAA tournament. And look, Talon Cooper wasn't pulling down $1 million, I don't think. You just really got fortunate with what you brought in with a guy with a ton of experience that ran the offense the way that he did. And as we know, when you kind of look at the numbers and stuff like that these days, it costs a lot to get some of those guys in today's realm of college basketball. So can Carolina go out there and spend on a guy like that? Because that was kind of the thing that we've looked at in these past couple portal cycles. And yes, you had Colin Murray-Boyles on the team as a guy that was just a talent that you brought along, from his freshman year anyway. But in terms of going out and getting guys from the transfer portal, we didn't look at anybody that they brought in this past year as like, oh, that guy's a dude. Like, that's going to be the guy this year. Michi, maybe to a degree, but you're bringing him back, and that was a different kind of situation. But nobody really overly wowed you with what they did at their prior school, and obviously you saw those results kind of match, this season for basketball.
And let's put it this way. I think in terms of, like, how this year's portal class stacks up to the rest, I would say this is the second best portal class. I think they've done it. Look, the players they actually brought in really have not been too bad on paper. Like, Elijah Strong's been pretty good. Michi coming back, he's having a career year. Shar Jumps has given you just about what you'd expect, averaging about 10 points, which is what he did at his other stops. So it's not like, and again, there's been a few duds. I think Kreist and Norden have kind of been not amazing, though. I think Norden's playing a lot better as of late, like we've talked about recently. So the portal class is fine. The problem is it has not led to good enough results. And look, I don't know what it's going to take for things to eventually take a turn for the best, but and maybe it is just having that perfect storm of everything come together, once every few years. But and South Carolina doesn't have this rich men's basketball history in the landscape of college basketball, but they have had success, and I think at some point you're trying to find an upward trajectory of being consistent for years to come, not just this one-off year every now and then, because that's just not ideal. Like, it's sustainable to some extent, but it's not ideal for a program that wants to be better.
We'll see what happens with them tomorrow night. Again, tipping off against Oklahoma 9:30. Pregame coverage starting at 9 here on 107.5 The Game. Tonight, baseball in action taking on the Citadel. We'll get into that as well as Alex Philpott making his first start for South Carolina later on today. Coming up next, it is The Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Feltry with you on your Tuesday on The Game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Beltry along with you here on your Tuesday on the game. Talking to baseball. Again, Carolina baseball in action. Coming up tonight as they take on the Citadel. Their final midweek game before they take on Florida for the start of SEC play coming up later on this week. I had some baseball action last night, though, with the World Baseball Classic as the United States stays undefeated in pool play, this time taking down Mexico by a score of 5-3 off the heels of a great opening start or a great outing by Paul Skeens, going 4 innings, 1 hit, 0 runs, and 7 strikeouts in his start last night. As again, the U.S. with one more pool game tonight to complete pool play, sitting undefeated right now.
Yeah, Paul was excellent last night. He only went 4 innings, so that's the thing. Pitch counts are really much lower here during the WBC, just because this is normally spring training time for a lot of guys. This is why I think we need the WBC at midseason at some point, just so guys can go much longer in the games. Because, you'd love to see Paul Skeens go 7-8 innings. But, no, he was great last night. The U.S. got some early run support. Aaron Judge hit a 2-run homer early on in this game, and then Roman Anthony from the Red Sox hit a 3-run homer, and that'd be all the cushion they need. Mexico's a good team. They fought back a little bit last night, but credit to the U.S.'s bullpen. Kind of at the end of the game, it was a good effort there, and it was very good to see Skeens have a good outing. And did you see the Air Force Academy was out there?
Yep.
Watching?
Yep, did think that was pretty cool. Of course, people kind of forget that Paul Skeens started his career at Air Force before going to LSU. But yeah, that was pretty cool to see.
Yeah, that was cool. And also Griffin Jacks, one of the relievers for the U.S., actually graduated from the Air Force. I didn't realize he's the first Air Force Academy graduate to play in the MLB. So that is a very cool story there for those two guys.
Did you see the memes of Paul Skeens and Bobby Witt Jr. from last night?
I did not. What am I missing here?
So, because Bobby Witt had a couple of great plays at shortstop, kind of dives, throws to first base, and stuff like that. And on one of them, the camera captures Paul Skeens just like smiling after watching him make a great play. And the joke was like, man, he doesn't even smile like that for Livy Dunn. But I'm like, was Livy Dunn's never played shortstop like that before?
I know. Look, Bobby Witt looked amazing at shortstop. As a Yankee fan who has to watch Anthony Volpe every day, I would love to have Bobby Witt as my shortstop. So I'm sure Aaron Judge is thinking the same thing. But yeah, great game overall last night. Yeah, you can't forget Bobby Witt's defensive heroics. He was just a menace over there at shortstop.
America back in action tonight, taking on Italy for the end of a pool play, looking to stay undefeated there as the World BC continues on. Same time tonight, or an hour before at least, start-wise, will be South Carolina baseball as they take on the Citadel out in Charleston. Pregame coverage starting at 6:45 for a 7 o'clock first pitch, which you can listen to right here on 107.5 Game. And the news of the day, Alex Philpott finally being able to return from injury, getting his first career start for South Carolina coming up tonight. He, of course, is a transfer over from Florida a season ago. Last year with the Gators, went 5-6, 7.12 ERA in 36 appearances, struck out 72 batters in 67 innings with 34 walks. And there's a guy, Jack, that we've talked about on and off for the past couple weeks that I think we've all been anticipating finally see him taking the mound for South Carolina.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a pretty big deal to have him back, and I'm personally looking forward to seeing what he can do for the Gamecocks. Now, he had been dealing with some elbow discomfort for a little while here, so that is why he hasn't really, taken the mound yet for the Gamecocks. But don't expect anything too crazy tonight. You're probably at most going to see him throw. I think Paul Maneri was telling me last week you'll probably see him throw anywhere between 20 to 25 pitches. So we're talking about an inning or two max, and that's just because he really, hasn't taken. And this will be his first outing, so it'll be good to see him out there. But again, it's going to be a very limited outing, and hopefully he can go out there and pitch well and then turn it over to the bullpen.
Yeah, so effectively he's going to be the opener tonight for a bullpen game. But you're right, somewhere between 20 and 25 pitches just to get him warmed up a little bit. And then it'll be interesting to see how this, plays out over time because, Maneri's talked about he's a guy that is a factor for the weekend rotation. And you obviously want to get that shirt up as soon as you can. And we've seen ups and downs, good and bad, out of most of the three guys that have started most of the games on the weekend for South Carolina. So it'd be interesting to see if Philpott obviously has a good outing tonight. He wouldn't be ready to go for this upcoming weekend, obviously. But, as we get into Arkansas and Georgia and stuff like that, if say a Riley Goodman is struggling or something like that, if they'd be willing to put Alex Philpott into that rotation then.
Yeah, I think eventually we'll probably get to the point where I think we do see him pitching somewhere, whether it is in the rotation or the see. I mean, I think South Carolina has a pretty good group of guys in the rotation right now. But let's be honest, Philpott was going to be in this rotation before getting hurt, and I think that would have led to Riley Goodman being in the bullpen. So from that standpoint, I think the pressure, not that there's pressure, but it's kind of like if Riley doesn't get it going soon and Philpott is building up, like I don't think Philpott would be ready to be in the rotation probably until maybe Arkansas at the earliest. I think you want to get him probably 2 outings. Maybe you get him 1 tonight, and then you get him maybe 1 over the weekend out of relief against Florida. And then hopefully whatever day he pitches on, maybe lines up with Goodman. And then if he's ready to go, pitch next week against Arkansas and Goodman struggles or something, then maybe you make the flip there. But we'll see what happens.
Also, and this goes back to Friday when Monero was sharing these updates, also getting closer to seeing Cullen Horwitz as well. We don't have an exact time when he's going to return, but he kind of grouped them together saying they were both throwing bullpens and both working towards getting back. Where obviously we're seeing Alex Philpott get the opportunity to return tonight, and hopefully Cullen Horwitz, the transfer from Sanford, will be back soon.
Yeah, the only reason we actually do know for sure, like when Philpott's coming back, and we just don't know yet officially on Horwitz, is just because in the game notes that South Carolina put out yesterday, it had Philpott listed as the starting pitcher. So we'll see. I won't be out there at the Citadel tonight, obviously, because I'm going to Nashville right now. But what I will say is keep an eye out just to see if he ends up maybe coming out of the bullpen tonight. It feels like the way Paul talked about both of them sounds like they're kind of on the same schedule. So by that theory and logic, it would make sense that maybe Cullen gets an inning tonight. Again, South Carolina is going to need multiple guys to throw tonight, and Horowitz has decent stuff. My thing with him has just always been control. If he can get that, I mean, he throws about 95, 96 miles an hour, tops at 99. If this guy can find some control in that arm, I think he's going to be really a nice little addition here for South Carolina.
Yeah, last year for Sanford, 10 into third innings pitched, 9 walks, 20 strikeouts. So, yeah, get that command under control a little bit. Obviously does a really good job of sitting batters down, and we'll see if maybe he can get an inning or 2 of work in tonight. But obviously 2 guys that will really kind of finish out the depth of South Carolina's arms when it comes to the pitching staff that would obviously provide them more options in terms of, maybe putting one of them, again, like you said, with Alex Philpott in the starting lineup if things go wrong with somebody else in that starting rotation. But the more depth you have at pitcher, the better, obviously, especially with Jake McCoy going out for the season. So I'm excited to see how Philpott and maybe Horwitz fare tonight if we do see him take the mound as well.
Yeah, it'll be very good to see these guys back again. These are like nice little reinforcements that you're getting. There's no trade deadline in college baseball. You can't make trades. But if there's anything similar to it, it's this. It's getting guys back that you brought in out of the transfer portal in the offseason. They get hurt, and now they're back, with a month into the season, and it comes right before SEC play. That's a good sign for the Gamecocks. And, yeah, I'm very interested to watch what Philpott will do tonight. I won't be at that game, but I will definitely be watching on ESPN+, and we'll see what he does.
And it's an opportunity for the team as a whole to obviously go 6-0 in the games between Clemson and Florida. Again, does that change our perception of this team? Not necessarily, but as we talked about yesterday, there is something to be said about going out there and doing your job, winning games, especially if you can win it in convincing fashion like you did against Princeton the other day, to hopefully ride some momentum going into this weekend where I think we're all feeling a little bit better, and we'll dive into the Florida matchup more specifically as the week goes along. But I think when you look at the struggles that Florida's had, like this past weekend against High Point, you say, okay, why can't South Carolina go in there and take 2 out of 3? Because if a team like High Point can do it, there's no reason why South Carolina can't. So I think a lot of us are feeling maybe more optimistic about this series a couple days out than we thought we were going to a few weeks ago.
Yeah, no, totally. Look, if they go 6-0 in this little stretch here, I think that's really good, especially considering what's going on around the SEC. Like, there's a lot of teams that, Arkansas just lost again yesterday to Stetson. So Florida dropped 2 out of 3 to High Point, nearly got swept. LSU dropped the series to Sacramento State. There's a lot of parity going on around the SEC that we just haven't really seen lately. And look, South Carolina's got to take advantage and kind of even the playing field a little bit by going out here and playing a good series this weekend. But again, first you have the game against the Citadel tonight, which is, the most important thing at hand right now.
Pregame coverage starts at 6:45. First pitch is at 7 o'clock. You can listen to that right here on 107.5 The Game. A lot of news going on in the NFL world this week as free agent deals are being done, trades as well. We'll get into some of the big news from yesterday coming up next as the Extra Point rolls along. Tyler Head and Jack Feltry along with you here on your Tuesday on The Game. All right, welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Felcher along with you here on your Tuesday on the game. We'll get to some NFL free agent stuff coming up here in just a moment. But, Jack, we do have some breaking news, and this isn't going to shock anybody, but we did talk about it at the beginning of the show. But we can confirm this per David Cloninger of the Post and Courier that the USC Athletic Department has confirmed to him that Lamont Paris will be returning for the 2026-2027 season, which, of course, will be year number 5 for him here at South Carolina. So despite the fact that this year was yet another underperforming season in the SEC, he is going to get another season here at Carolina. Of course, we've talked about with the anticipation that there will be more resources allocated to allow South Carolina to be more competitive compared to other teams in the SEC.
Yeah, look, this news made a lot of sense. It's not really that shocking, to be honest. Again, like we talked about earlier, it's a huge – the difference is really substantial in terms of, like, the decision here. It's either you fired him and you're paying a huge buyout and you're – like, it's a probably – I don't know the exact dollar amount of what it would be ultimately have been, but you're probably talking somewhere closer to about $20 million worth of money that you have to allocate towards moving on from him, hiring a coach, hiring a staff, firing the staff that's currently there, and also, adding more NIL budget rather than just, adding more NIL resources to LP right now, a guy that has had success here before. I know his time at South Carolina has not been great, but this is a guy that had a lot of success 2 years ago, and I think that gives him the benefit of the doubt in this situation of he's a guy that has done it before, and you're hoping with even a more competitive budget to work with, especially in a conference like the SEC where you have a team like Kentucky reportedly spending like $20 million. I mean, that's the ceiling. So you have to be somewhere in the middle there to at least be competitive in this league.
And look, I don't know if we're going to know those exact number figures, but if you can get in that $8 to $10 million range, you hope that's going to be enough to allow you to be, competitive. Because, again, you don't have to be the highest spender. You just have to obviously have more than what Carolina has been able to advocate these past couple of years, likely to give yourself a good shot in the SEC. Because, again, the bar to clear to get into the NCAA tournament isn't insanely high. Again, if you add 3 or 4 more wins to South Carolina's resume, you're at least in the conversation there of being a bubble type of team. So it's not that they have that far to go, and hopefully with those additional resources, they'll be able to close that gap they haven't been able to the past couple of years. And look, this is not going to be popular with a lot of people. I'm already seeing, just kind of looking at Cloninger's tweet here. It's mainly negative responses, and I totally get that. I'm not telling you have to be happy about this, right? And I completely understand the part of the fan base that's upset and frustrated by this, because in 75% of the seasons that Lamont Paris has been here, 3 out of 4 years, they've underperformed. Now, maybe you can give them all again for year number 1 because year number 1, but the past 2 years especially, coming off the heels of making the tournament, hasn't been anywhere close to where you wanted it to be or anywhere close to making the tournament, again. So I understand the frustration. I'm not telling you can't be upset about it, but as we've kind of been saying for the past couple weeks, it is what it is, and this is what's happening, and you have to deal with it for what it is and hope for the best.
There's another thing that we really haven't talked about much that needs to honestly be considered here. Like, if you did hypothetically move on from him, the question always is next, okay, well, who are you going to hire? And it's not as cut and dry to say, because this is, like, we were talking about that Field of 64 story from a few weeks ago. I think it was from them about or Field of 68, my bad.
Yeah.
From, Jeff Goodman and those guys about just, this is the worst job in the SEC, according to various different people in college basketball. And it's not hard to see why. I mean, just the resources aren't great. The history is not, outside of like some good years in the 70s, South Carolina really has just not been great in college basketball, aside from, of course, 2 years ago and the Final Four year. So it's just, who are you going to hire? I mean, Bob Ritchie from Furman? Okay, cool, but, he's getting paid pretty well there, and you'd have to probably pay him. That's the thing, with any coach you would want to hypothetically bring in, especially the bigger names, you're going to have to probably pay them even more to come here, and then you're just getting back into potential really bad buyout situations. So I think right now, look, you got a lot of work to do to get this program back to where it needs to be. The fan base, you're going to have to win them over. It's that the fan base has spoken loud and clear that they are not happy with what's going on. Look at the attendance for these games. I mean, look, the tickets they've sold might be good because they're season tickets, but the crowds have been terrible, and anyone with two eyes can see that, and that's something that is an underlying factor here that you're really going to have to, change. And how do you do that? You win, right? 2 years ago when they played Tennessee with a chance to, take over first place in the SEC, that place was packed. Now, 2 years later, facing Tennessee again on senior night, basically around the same time, that was a half-empty arena. So you really have to find a way to get those fans back. And again, the recipe for that is to start winning again. And it's going to be tough, but if you have a bigger budget, you can only increase your chances, hopefully.
Well, and it's going to be winning again in the SEC. Look, to start next year, I don't expect the fan support to be insanely high as you're going through non-conference games against, Charleston Southern and East Tennessee State and stuff like that. Like, it's going to take winning early on in the SEC to really get people over to Colonial Life Arena because, again, the majority of the product they've seen under Lamont Paris has not been that great, and I can understand people being frustrated by that. Now, this is where I'll give a hat tip to Jeremiah Donati because part of bringing Lamont Paris back would be guaranteeing you're going to be able to give him more resources. So those checks have to come from somewhere, and I don't know what his pitch was to those people that write those checks, but it was obviously enough to convince them to be able to allocate more resources to a basketball program that has been struggling with the belief that with more money and being able to go out there and seemingly get better talent, Lamont Paris can make this program successful.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's tough to sell what's going on right now and just say it's going to be better. Anyone can say it's going to be better, but we have no guarantee here. And I guess, look, if Lamont didn't have the success he had 2 years ago, I don't think we'd be sitting here having this conversation of him being back as a sure thing. But, he's back and, or reportedly back. And, I think it is the right move for South Carolina right now because I just don't know if you get much better moving forward if you move on from him and then you're hiring a whole new step. You're just talking about a situation that you just don't. We don't know if it would be any better than it is right now. Getting rid of the guy, doesn't necessarily automatically mean that everything's gonna suddenly turn better. It could continue to get worse from here, but we'll see. I mean, this is a situation that it's a complicated move to make, and I think honestly, this time, just because of how much of a financial burden it would have been to move on from him, along with everything else, I think this is probably the right decision for this athletics department.
Again, just about 10 minutes or so ago, David Kleininger of the Post-Courier did confirm that it was confirmed to him by the athletics department that Lamont Paris will return for next year. And like I said, I can understand if you're upset and frustrated about that. I'm not telling you have to be happy about it, but as we've been talking about, this is what it is. This is what's happening, and we'll move forward accordingly, and we'll see what happens tomorrow out in Nashville and see if they can get a game or two, out there. And again, how Lamont goes forward now, knowing that he's returning, is going to be interesting too. And you guys will get to talk to him coming up tonight, so I'm interested to hear what he has to say about it.
Yeah, me too. I mean, we're going to hear from him tonight, tomorrow. However long they're in the SEC tournament, we'll hear from him. I'm also interested in hearing from some of the players, even the ones that have a potential to be back next year. I mean, I'm sure that also plays a lot into some of these guys' decision on whether or not to come back. Because, again, we talked about the video yesterday from the Ole Miss post game. Those guys seemingly really like to play for him.
Yep.
So we'll see what happens, man. But, yeah, it's going to be an interesting time out here in Nashville now that we know this.
So there you go. News of the morning. Lamont Paris returning for next season for South Carolina men's basketball. They're back in action tomorrow for the opening round of the SEC tournament. Pregame coverage at 9 o'clock for a 9:30-ish tip right here on 107.5 Game. We are going to hit a little bit of NFL free agency coming up next to wrap up hour number one. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Feltry on your Tuesday on the Game. All right, welcome back in. Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Felcher wrapping up hour number one here on your Tuesday on the game. Again, Jack on the way to Nashville to cover men's basketball as they get set for the SEC men's tournament opening round coming up tomorrow night. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, a lot of things happening in the NFL when it comes to free agents and trades and all that kind of stuff, and a lot of very interesting signings. One of the most notable ones involves my favorite team, as the Atlanta Falcons have signed Tua Tagovailoa to a one-year deal after he was let go by the Dolphins. Of course, Tua, high pick, dealt with a lot of injuries, namely concussions in his NFL career. He's had his ups and downs, and he's going into an interesting situation as the Falcons quarterback room already has Michael Penix Jr. is dealing with injuries. They're letting go of Kirk Cousins. I don't know how this is going to work out, Jack, to be honest with you.
I don't know either, honestly. I mean, look, I think Tua gives them probably a chance to be semi-successful because, honestly, I look at some of the Falcons' weapons they have, assuming they're all there for next season. It's a pretty good offensive system in terms of guys that Tua will have the chance to play with. Now, of course, he'll have to beat out Penix for the starting quarterback job, which is no guarantee. But we saw what Tua could do, maybe not last year, but in some of his better seasons with guys like Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, guys like that to throw to. I think there is potential for him to have some success. And maybe, honestly, just a change of scenery is all he needed. We'll see. But, I mean, this is a guy that's had a lot of injuries over the course of his career. You're hoping he can stay healthy, number one. And, honestly, it's a one-year deal. It's, in my opinion, Tyler, and you can honestly let me know if you agree or disagree on this, but I feel like this is kind of a low-risk, high-reward type of thing just because you're not committing multiple years to him. I think it's probably the smart strategy here just to give him a one-year flyer deal. And if he does great. Maybe sign him long-term in the future. But if it's not so great, you don't have to worry about, contract problems for the next few years.
Yeah, it's one of those things that he's essentially kind of acting as your bridge until Michael Penix Jr. gets to the point where you're good with him, and obviously he's dealing with his own injuries that he has to come back from. So you're looking at a situation where Tua could potentially be, your season, the starter at the beginning of the season. Hopefully Penix gets to the point where he's in good shape and can, take things over towards the back half. And if you feel comfortable with where you're at with Penix Jr., then boom, there's your future at the quarterback spot. That's just still very much up in the air right now. So yeah, you needed to have a veteran to at least be there as an option. Now, again, when it comes to Tua, he's obviously dealt with his own share of injuries, namely concussions, as I mentioned a moment ago, where he's one hit away from being done for the year, maybe being done for a career. So that is something that gives you a lot of pause. But you're right. When you looked at when he was at his most successful within that Dolphins offense, it was getting the ball out to playmakers and letting them do a lot of work. And when you have Drake London, when you have Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson, they signed Austin Hooper, who's a sure-handed tight end coming back to Atlanta. You're going to have options to get the ball to around you, and we'll see if that ends up being successful if he does end up starting the majority of the season this year.
Yes, I mean, I think this is something that, again, low risk for the Falcons here, and there's definitely some high reward there just because of all those potential offensive weapons you just mentioned. Like, I feel like it's hard. It's kind of astonishing that Penix hasn't really had the most success yet. But again, he's had a lot of injuries and whatnot. I think a guy like Tua that really, I feel like, just needs a change of scenery. He can thrive in that offense, especially with a new coaching staff there. We'll see what happens, but it's an interesting move for the Falcons.
Are you aware of how successful Tua has been at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, by the way?
I am not. How successful has he been?
Undefeated, 4-0, 3 games in college, 1 game in the NFL. Of course, he came in and won the national championship for them back in January of 2018. He started the SEC championship game that Jalen Hurts won for them later on that year. They also played a Chick-fil-A kickoff game against Duke where he obliterated them with 4 touchdowns and over 300 yards. And then last year, his first ever pro start there was his best game of the entire year, 205 yards and 4 touchdowns. So in his career at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, 871 yards, 12 touchdowns, 3 interceptions.
That's pretty good. And also, he's playing a lot closer to Alabama, so maybe that will, I don't know, maybe that comfortability will help him a bit. But, Yeah, we'll see. I mean, a change of scenery can always be really good for a guy, and Tua's still young. It's not like he is in his late 30s and, in his twilight years. Like, this guy's got plenty of ball left to play, but this is an important year for him because if he doesn't really do well, I don't know many teams that would, be willing to sign him as much as, right now.
It is funny. He literally just turned 28 like a week ago. It feels like he's been in the league forever. And, yeah, like you said, he's not even 30 yet.
Yeah, he's been in the league, since he got drafted in 2020, right? So,
Yeah, that's correct.
He's been around for a while, and look, he's had some success. He's played with some good players. I just think injuries really have hurt him a lot, and it's important to stay healthy now, and he gets a fresh start to really see what he can do here as he kind of enters what now is essentially his prime years.
We'll get into some more of the free agent stuff in the NFL tomorrow. That's all we have time for today because there's a lot of other things happening around the league. But, Jack, be safe, and we'll talk to you tomorrow in Nashville.
Yeah, man, take it easy.
That's hour number 1 in the books. Coming up next, it's the Garnet Trust Hour presented by Krantz Cooling, Heating, and Plumbing here on your Tuesday on the Game. Welcome back in. Garnet Trust Hour presented by Krantz Cooling, Heating, and Plumbing. Tyler Head and Chris Clark along with you here on your Tuesday on the Game. We let Jack focus on driving. He's on his way to Nashville. Didn't want to be any more of a distraction than we already were, and it's a long drive. He's leaving from Clemson. He was taking his brother and his friend to class and then heading to Nashville, but that's still like 5-6 hours, I think. Like, it's funny. Nashville feels like it's close, but it's not. You know what I mean? Like, I drove there last year from Atlanta, and that was like 6 hours. Like, you think a neighboring state, but Tennessee's very, very wide, and it's kind of smack in the middle there, kind of. So, yeah, he's going to be driving for a while today.
Did he drive to Clemson just to take his brother and friend to class? That was nice of him.
No, I don't think specifically. I know he crashed there last night. He told me for some reason. His brother actually let him sleep on the bed instead of the couch this time, so he's moving up. But I was like, well, it's a trade-off. He lets you sleep in the bed, you take him to class, so fair there. But, yeah, we calculated it, or I calculated it. Jack's going to be driving about 2,000 miles over the course of the next week, so this is leg one of that journey.
Last time that I drove to Tennessee, we were going out more Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge area. Saw a bear on the side of the road.
Seems very Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge-esque.
It was.
Just bears everywhere.
You remember how I told you I was going to be driving to Atlanta last week, and I was going to get in, absolutely was going to time it up at the worst possible time.
How'd that go?
That's exactly what happened. Left about, 1 o'clock, 1:15, 1:30. I was like, yep, I'm gonna get in. And when you go out to the Battery area, it's past downtown a little bit. Like you got to go through. What is that? What are you on at that point? 85, whatever. You're on the interstate and you're kind of driving through downtown. You got to go past it. So of course I'm sitting there. It's like 4:30. Yep, this is it. There's traffic everywhere.
Yep.
It was a disaster.
Coming back from Nashville last year was the worst traffic I've ever been in. Because again, and we were going back to my parents' house to stay the night before we headed back, this way the next day. And, the drive itself was already like 6 hours. And, I knocked out the first 5.5 hours pretty quickly. And it legitimately took me another 2 hours to go the final 20 miles, I think. It was ridiculous. So don't miss that at all. So to Jack, have fun. It's gonna be an adventure.
Good luck, Jack.
And it's gonna be a late night tomorrow night for Carolina playing the late game. Again, it says 9:30 tip. It's gonna be more closer to 10 if I'm gonna guess, because game number one's probably gonna run long, and then you gotta have everybody warm up and all that kind of stuff. So get your coffee or whatever you need to stay up for tomorrow night's game as Carolina maybe plays his last game of the season, maybe wins, maybe goes Thursday. We don't know. But what we do know, as we learned in the last hour, is Lamont Paris is going to come back for 2026 and 2027. This isn't shocking. We've been talking about this on and off for the past couple of weeks. We kind of anticipated this happening. What we'd heard, national outlets reporting it as well. This was probably going to be the case. But now, before playing tomorrow, we know for sure that Lamont Paris isn't on the hot seat anymore, at least for this season, and can focus ahead on building the roster for next year once their time in Nashville's done.
Yeah, and I did some checking on this morning as well. No indication that, there's anything different than what's being said. I did get a note, hey, maybe not 100% fine. What that seems to be, it seemed to be the direction this was going in. I think we're just getting more and more confirmation that this is the plan. I think it would have to be a complete and utter, shocking almost reversal at this point. And so I think here's where my mind went, looking at the why, because the reaction on this has been, like most things, it's been mixed. You've got some people that say, understand. You've got maybe even more people as a percentage saying, kind of, what in the world, why? And I think there's a few things here. So number one, if you're making the case of like, and I know you and Jack were talking a little bit about this in the last hour. Why would South Carolina make this decision at this point instead of starting over? And even if you don't believe this, I think you can look at what is the case. Okay. So Lamont Paris has had one quite good season at South Carolina. And now you may immediately say, well, that's one good season. That's not really good enough. Okay, fair argument. He's got the one really good season in which I think that team was exactly the type of team that Lamont Paris wanted, envisioned, and it was a really good team. They did end up getting bounced in the first round of the NCAA tournament, of course, but they finished second in the league. They were 26-8. They were 13-5. They were playing
a record for wins in a season.
They were in the last, what was it, the last game of the SEC season with a chance to literally win it against Tennessee in a very competitive game. That's the type of year, that you can't even say, I expect this type of year unless you're at, I don't know, Kentucky or something like that. You'd love for that to be the bar. It's not here, but it was a really good year. Now, the other ones, take out year one because kind of a wash, whatever. Past couple seasons haven't been good enough, and they haven't really been close to good enough, right? We've all seen the statistics that are the complete opposite of what I just said. But I do think there's a belief of, hey, and I'm talking from South Carolina's perspective here, Lamont has shown that he can construct a roster that year and can coach. Why have the other two not gone well? Well, there's so much conversation about NIL, and I think we're past the point of why did it play out that way? The reality is two things, I think, on the NIL front, roster building specifically. You got to have good players to win. Nobody's ever scrapped their way to a championship. That's ultimately your goal. Why has it not worked? It is true that South Carolina more than doubled their spend from last basketball season, 24-25, to 25-26. More than doubled. True. Also true, still towards the bottom of the league in terms of what they spent. Okay? I guess technically three things. Also, fair to say, while we're trying to be fair, even counting the fact that you are not spending in many cases with your peers in the league, there's a really good argument that you still didn't deploy the roster funding in the most effective way, right?
Yeah.
I mean, for instance, you put together a roster built on, hey, we're going to come out and we're going to shoot. And if you squinted, you're like, okay, I see deficiencies defensively. I see deficiencies in terms of post play and rebounding. But if this team is built that way, maybe it'll work. Well, it didn't work. They still took a lot of threes, didn't make a lot. And why that was? Maybe you go back to coaching. Maybe you go back to how you constructed the roster with all those different pieces working together. Remember, it's a roster of guys that had not really played together because you brought in so many transfers, and a lot of those guys were on their, third school, for instance. So what has to change going forward? If you're saying, I think, Tyler, also, how much does the contract and if Lamont Paris was on the last year of his deal, for instance, would this be a different conversation? I think it's fair to say maybe. I don't know that for sure, but maybe. So then you go to what changes. Well, the first and most obvious thing is that this program will spend more in NIL next year. I think that's pretty obvious. I think that becomes a little bit of a dangerous game because the numbers have gone up every year. South Carolina could not have even come close to putting together that roster in terms of cost 3 years ago. Nowadays, couldn't do it. Yeah. All those players would command 2, 3, 4 times more than what they were getting, and maybe they all go play at other schools. And I just think you kind of struck gold. You had some connections. You had some guys from the state of South Carolina that played in the state of South Carolina, did a great job constructing that roster. I think it's dangerous to just say, just spend more and things will get better. Because you can be planning on spending more, and guess what's going to happen? Every other school out there in the league is going to say, you know what, we're going to spend more too, even if they were a top spender. So that becomes a little bit dangerous. So no doubt you have to spend more. You also have to make sure what changes are going to be made to make sure that those funds are deployed in a smart way? What are you going to do? You know, like look at football.
Mm-hmm.
Football, there were some legit questions this offseason. How much are they going to spend in NIL? Well, they ended up getting a pretty hefty investment. They're not going to be Texas Tech. They spent a lot. Just look at the roster. You can kind of guess. To retain the guys they did, to hit the portal and the high school recruiting ranks like they did, it was an expensive proposition. Shane Beamer also made some other changes. Made the most coaching changes he's ever made. The offense is overhauled. 3 new coaches on offense. Brought in Rex Hogan in the personnel department as another set of eyes. You know, Darren Usher's still running the show there, but additional personnel to help further with the evaluation process. So, yes, the clear thing is if you're bringing Lamont Paris back, yeah, of course you're going to spend more in NIL. Where do you end up relative to your peers? And then what is the plan to make sure that the other aspects that are also very important, evaluating, scouting, coaching on game day, how do you make sure that those parts are buttoned up too? And frankly, I don't think we have, other than knowing that those two things, there's going to be changes in NIL, I'm pretty confident there's going to be other structural changes to the program, whether that's things we see on a staff list or it's things behind the scenes. I'm pretty sure there's going to be a plan for that, but I don't think we quite have the answers to any of that just yet.
And, you know, as we've been talking about this on and off for the past couple weeks, anticipating that this was going to be the direction they decided to go, one thing that kept coming up, and I know Bill's talked about this a lot on the halftime show with me, is that Donati was very impressed with what Paris did now 2 years ago with the team that made the tournament, considering the fact that you still weren't spending as much as everybody in the SEC, but you made do with what you had, and obviously it was the right collection of talent that you got to one of the best seasons Carolina's ever had, at least certainly in recent memory. So I think there's a lot of belief of like, hey, he's proven he can do it before, even without top-of-the-line resources. If we give him a little bit more, then maybe we can get back in that competitive space. And look, South Carolina's not a program where the expectation is to be in the Elite Eight every single year. If you can put yourself in the conversation of being in the tournament, not even making the tournament every single year, historically, considering everything historically, that's pretty good, right? If you make the tournament 3 out of 5 years and you're a bubble team those other 2 years, that's consistent and that's successful. Now, again, you have to get to that point, but you're not leaps and bounds away from where I think a lot of people want you to be. Again, if you add 3 or 4 more wins to the resume this year, you're at least entering the conversation of a team that could be in the conversation for making the tournament, depending on what, you know, those wins are and stuff like that. So it's not this insanely high hill to climb to get yourself back to that realm. It's just a matter of going out there and doing it. And obviously Lamont Paris is going to be in a put it up or shut up type of year next year, but there is belief that he can get it done from the people that make these decisions.
Yeah, there is a level of belief, and I think all those things that we already discussed, whether it's the contract, the NIL, the fact that he does have, you know, if he didn't have that really, really good year to fall back on in year 2, I don't think we'd be having this conversation, to be quite frank. At the same time, what we've seen the past couple seasons, and I think anybody around the basketball program, certainly fans, administration would say this, whether publicly or privately, it hasn't been close to good enough. I mean, you're right, Tyler, if they had added a few more wins, right? But, I mean, the football program last year, how many fourth quarter games did they have?
True.
The conversation is, ultimately, you are what your record is. And Shane Beamer, you know, says that in the same context of football, like, we're 4-8, you are what your record is. You can look back and say, literally, South Carolina was close in a lot of those games. So the bottom line is they didn't win them. Frankly, when you look at the basketball program, many of the games the past 2 seasons, yeah, they've had some close losses. A lot of them haven't been close. And, you know, so can you get back there? Again, not saying you have to get back to finish second in the SEC, but you've absolutely got to be in the tournament conversation next season.
We'll see. Again, back in action tomorrow in the SEC men's tournament, taking on Oklahoma. What did Greg Sankey have to say about the SEC and the teams want to break away? We'll discuss that coming up next. Garden Trust Hour here in the game.
All right, y'all, as we've told you on the show here for several days now, our friends over at Krantz Cooling, Heating, and Plumbing, yes, they've added in another couple words there. They can now help you with all of your home or business plumbing needs. Since 1983, they've been a local family-owned business helping out residents and business owners around the Midlands with any of their HVAC needs. For a while now, they've been a presenting sponsor here on Tuesdays and Thursdays of the game of the Garnet Trust Hour. We appreciate Justin Krantz, the general manager, and his team. And I can personally attest, and so can Wes, to how great of a job they do on the HVAC front. Now they've added plumbing. Same great service from the folks over at Krantz. Go check them out. Website is still krantzcooling.com, Krantz, cooling with a K.com. 0% APR for 60 months on qualifying equipment, indoor air quality, heating, and cooling. Krantzcooling.com.
Welcome back in. It is the Garnet Trust Hour presented by Krantz Cooling, Heating, and Plumbing. Tyler Head and Chris Clark along with you here on your Tuesday on the game. As we are in the off season of football, that means we focus on a lot of things not involving what's going to be happening on the field coming up this fall, and that also includes the greater conversation of college sports as a whole. And of course, earlier on, or I guess it was last week, when the president convened, 40 or 50 people for that big roundtable discussion about having to fix college sports, how much got done there, I don't know. When you have that many people in a room in a very short period of time, I don't know how many people get to talk. I don't know how all that went, and I don't know how much is going to get done because of that. But one of the people in that room was Greg Sankey, commissioner of the SEC, and yesterday he went on Paul Feinbaum to discuss kind of what happened there, as well as, again, kind of give the latest on where the SEC stands with this greater conversation of what's happening with the future of college sports. And one quote in particular stuck out when Paul Feinbaum posed the thought that we've thrown out there of, hey, could the SEC eventually break away and do its own thing? And Greg Sankey was very honest about those conversations within the SEC. I think it's interesting because, again, this isn't going to happen without Greg Sankey being okay with it. But there are apparently schools within the SEC that are like, hey, let's go do our own thing. We don't know who those schools are. We can probably take a guess on who they might be, the Texases and teams like that. But there are schools that want this, but the commissioner, at least as of right now, says, no, we have these obligations to D1, these other schools that we're not trying to ruin. Now, that can obviously change, but for the time being, things are going to stay the same. But that possibility always exists out there of the SEC going independent, doing its own thing, whatever you want to call it. And that was one of the first times I think I've heard Greg Sankey actually acknowledge that conversation.
I went exactly where your mind did. Who are the schools? How many and who are they? And I immediately thought the Texas schools, because that's
sure
what they do. Everything's bigger.
They've got the most money. Money yields power.
Is there anybody else you think that's random that, like, I cannot imagine South Carolina being like, I mean, maybe,
Yeah.
I mean, there's some maybe valid reasons as long as you can stay in the SEC to break away and do your own thing.
Yeah.
Texas schools are probably.
Because, again, all this, it boils down to money at the end of the day, as everything in college sports and all sports ultimately does. Because I feel like when you're talking about the Texas schools, there's this knowledge that they're not going to have to worry about the funding necessarily, because when you break away and do your own thing, you're changing television contracts, changing all these kind of things, and the SEC would still be in very high demand. So I'm not denying the fact they'd still be able to have a great television deal with ESPN and stuff like that, but there goes into this realm of the unknown a little bit, and for a school that isn't as competitive from a monetary standpoint compared to some of those other schools like Texas and Texas A&M, I could see you being hesitant to want to go into those uncharted waters because of that unknown.
Yeah, I'd be interested in what are the I mean, you're right. Like, everything does tie back to money, right? But there's also a lot of conversations and frustrations, frankly, with exactly where we are. So much of it's related to NIL and the portal and enforcement. And look, a lot of the coaches in schools are going to stand up there and say, we need enforcement, We need this school to get in trouble. And then they're doing the same things, But when you have that many stakeholders, it's just like the example, and I'm not getting political here, but when you get the summit that you mentioned where the president brought in some different stakeholders, and there's so many voices, how much is going to get done other than kind of talking, bloviating? Probably not a lot. That's why the saying is such and such going to take an act of Congress. That means it's really hard when you got that many people,
Sure,
all serving different various interests. It's hard to get things done. There has been so much conversation about a congressional bill, still hasn't gotten done. If I had to guess, probably not going to get done. Even if it's been somewhat of a priority because there's been a lot of discussion about it, but nothing's gotten done. So kind of same thing here, right? Like when you've got the entirety of Division I, when you've got the entirety of the Power Four, there's a lot of different schools and a lot of stakeholders. And so even within the SEC, just with 16 teams, you're not going to have lockstep, and this is what we need to do. I mean, Sankey said it. We've got some that would like to break off. Others presumably are completely good where they are. He thinks they're completely good staying within the current structure. But all the different issues that are facing college athletics, it does have some people wondering if you're, the SEC or the Power Four or whatever it may be, do we need to break off and do something different that would still make us a lot of money? And then we have more control because there's less people over certain things. It's an interesting question. I don't know if it happens anytime soon, but it is interesting to think about.
Yeah, again, we kind of always pose this as like this hypothetical of a super league or whatever you want to call it, where the SEC and the Big Ten are off doing their own thing, and I guess the ACC, Big 12, conferences like that would still exist under the NCAA structure. And again, it's a lot easier said than done, but it is interesting that these conversations are at least coming up, and that certain schools, it seems like, do understand that they have potential power to do this. And I guess when you're talking about Greg Sankey, because like any commissioner, he works for the schools or teams, however you want to phrase it. So if you get to the point where over half the conference wants to do this, that's a different conversation. If it's only a handful right now, okay, it's still not the majority. But if this number of teams that's interested in doing that continues to grow, then we could be in a different situation, but it doesn't sound like we're there yet.
Not there yet. And, Sankey brought up some points about he wants, that integration to stay where you're not just competing in your own conference, you're going outside, because what would all that look like? I don't think we know. So there's so many conversations going on at the same time in parallel related to so many different things. And we do need some type of relief, meaning a structure. I think there are lots of different ideas about how to get there. Is it just everybody finally coming together and figuring out internally, is it that, an executive order has been brought up? What has been said in terms of the structure of that executive order would absolutely get challenged. The president said that,
Yep.
So would it work? Is it breaking away? Is it a congressional bill? Probably not, but we're going to keep having this conversation about how do you create a structure, because we still don't have one.
A quote comes out yesterday from Parker Livingstone, former Texas wide receiver. It's now gone to Oklahoma, that I think really kind of speaks volumes to where we're at in college sports. I want to get into that on the other side and really dive into that, because Andy Staples had a good write-up on that for On 3 earlier on this morning, as we continue on with the Garnet Trust Hour presented by Krantz Cooling, Heating, and Plumbing. Tyler Head and Chris Clark on your Tuesday on the Game. All right, welcome back in. It is the Garnet Trust Hour presented by Krantz Cooling, Heating, and Plumbing. Tyler Hayden, Chris Clark along with you here on your Tuesday on the game. A reminder, coming up on Friday, April 3rd, we'll be out at Charwood Golf Club in West Columbia for the Game Spring Golf Classic featuring Saki's Morning Libations Bar. Onion sausages provided by the Lexington Gamecock Club, and the Golf Gun makes its return as well. If you want to take part, it's $400 per team. Give Charwood a call at 803-755-2000 and press the number 2 to register for the Game's Spring Golf Classic. Rivalries are one of the best parts of college sports, and the hatred that you have for the team within your state, the team across state lines, whatever it may be, is what fuels a lot of the passion in this sport. So let me throw a hypothetical at you, Chris. Let's say this past offseason, South Carolina was not able to retain Nick Harbor, and he went to Clemson. How would people feel about that locally?
Would not like.
He'd be like, oh, he's dead to us, he's a traitor, blah, 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 blah. But what if instead of having Nick Harbor return, he goes to Clemson, Carolina signed like Cam Coleman out of the transfer portal, who was the most sought-after wide receiver this cycle, and signed him to a big deal, and he would unequivocally be your number one guy. Would that soften the blow a little bit?
I would say so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's the exact situation that Texas has found themselves in with their wide receiver room, where they did get Cam Coleman, who Arch Manning will be throwing to, as Cam Coleman played at Auburn this past year, was the most sought-after wide receiver prospect in the portal, and again, Texas shelled out the money to get him. Well, that left Parker Livingstone, who was a very reliable receiver for Texas this past year, Arch Manning's roommate nonetheless, in a tough spot. And a quote comes out yesterday where he says, because he's at Oklahoma now, for those that aren't aware, again, big rivalry there. He says, if I didn't have an agent, I'd probably still be in Austin right now. That's the truth. And again, Andy Staples has a really good write-up on this on On3, and I encourage you to go read it, because I think a lot of people took that as, well, my agent pushed me to leave Texas, and that's why I'm at Oklahoma. But it's more about understanding the value of where you're at, what you can get paid, and what you can make. And again, everything's about maximizing your potential, maximizing your earnings, and all that kind of stuff for most of these players in college. And he saw an opportunity where he could go make more at, albeit a rival school, and he took that. And his agent would encourage him to do that, because that's going to benefit everybody in the long run in terms of making more money. And that's kind of a perfect encapsulation of where college sports are right now, where Livingstone wanted to stay at Texas, but it made more sense financially for him to go to Oklahoma.
Yeah, Parker Livingston is not the first player to say that, and it's happens a lot more behind the scenes. There's so much of what is their offer? What are they paying you? That's crazy. I can get you this. And, there are, of course, cases where players hop in the portal and they don't get that. They do not get the situation that they're looking for, whether it's personally, professionally. By that, I mean just football related, and certainly financially. And there are cases where players go in the portal and they end up doing very well for themselves. I don't know the details, the financial details on Parker Livingston. I've seen some Texas people say he had an offer for, I don't remember what it was, $500,000 or something. That's crazy. He didn't take that. I don't know what he's getting at Oklahoma. But with this thing becoming more and more professionalized, I mean, look at I think, Tyler, of the Freddie Freeman situation. Mm-hmm. Think about Freddie Freeman when he's a free agent with the Braves. And for all intents and purposes, it kind of sounds like he was just kind of told, like, oh, that's not going to work out. And he's like, what?
Yeah.
And it took him a long time. He's doing well now. He's happy, which is great. Love Freddie. But his instructions from all the reporting was, I want to re-sign with the Braves. Let me know when that's done. It was kind of that. And then it just went back and forth, and it didn't end up working out. And I think he fired his agents, right?
I think so.
So I'm not saying, Parker Livingston, I'm not saying that he's so unhappy he's firing his agent. Parker's actually a good dude. He heavily considered South Carolina during the recruiting process, actually. He took an official visit here. But you do see this now, like, as we get closer and closer to pro sports. I mean, we're kind of in pro sports, just with no structure, no salary cap. Contracts, but they're all year to year,
sure,
or half year, basically. And you're going to get that. You're going to get an agent that you already have, or you're going to get an agent that comes to you to solicit, you as a client that says, hey, man, you can get a lot more if you hit the portal and go here. And frankly, I mean, put yourselves in these athletes' shoes. There's some appeal to that, knowing, hey, I can go somewhere else. I'm pretty happy here. Parker Livingston's from Texas.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty happy here, but heck, I can go be set for life. I mean, put yourself in their shoes. That's kind of appealing.
Well, and, again, Cam Coleman being the big receiver that he is not only going to come in and command more from a financial standpoint, but also you're taking away catches and opportunities from a guy like Parker Livingston. So going to Oklahoma, theoretically, perhaps a better deal financially, but also a better opportunity to be featured more within their offense. And that's just kind of how it is today. Every school's looking for the opportunity to make themselves the best. And I'm sure Parker Livingston grew up a big Texas fan and, again, was roommates with Arch Manning. But at the end of the day, these guys are looking out for the most part for their best self-interest, and this seems like a better opportunity and a better place for him to be to end up being more successful and potentially get himself to the NFL and all those kind of things. And again, if you're a Texas fan, you're probably looking at this saying, well, that guy's dead to us. Can't believe he go to Oklahoma. But again, we're in a transactional business, and this is just a series of transactions that occurred, and now he's playing for the Sooners.
Well, we've seen several former Clemson players play for Gamecock baseball, for instance. Yep. And, Nathan Hall, had a really good year. Others maybe not so much. But, for Parker, there's also a thought that, we're talking about the financials, but you brought up a good point, just the development part of it. I mean, he had a solid season. I mean, he caught 6 touchdowns, 29 catches. I think he's still a young player. He's got some room to potentially go up there and do well for himself. So, yeah, it's just fascinating. I mean, you don't see guys, you see guys move around all the time. You don't see it still quite as much like big rival to big rival, but it does happen. So we'll probably continue seeing more of this.
Yeah, again, kind of a microcosm where we're at with everything. We'll get back to things happening on the field and on the court coming up next, because a South Carolina team did punch their ticket to the NCAA tournament last night. We'll talk about that coming up next to wrap up the hour. Garnet Trust Hour presented by Krantz Cooling, Heating, and Plumbing. It's our head and Chris Clark here on The Game. All right, welcome back in. Garnet Trust Hour presented by Krantz Cooling, Heating, and Plumbing. Tyler Head and Chris Clark wrapping up the hour here on your Tuesday on the game. Again, Gamecock men's basketball back in action tomorrow night as they take on Oklahoma in the opening round of the SEC men's tournament. Tip-off around 9:30. Pregame coverage starting at 9 o'clock here on the game. And, of course, we know with how the season's gone, it would take 5 wins in 5 days if South Carolina were to punch their ticket to the NCAA tournament. But if you need a local team to cheer for when the tournament starts coming up here in a little over a week's time, you can look none other than the Furman Paladins, who last night won the SoCon over East Tennessee State and have once again punched their ticket to the NCAA tournament for the second time in the past 4 years under Bob Ritchie. If Carolina's not in the tournament, do you go with like local team? Do you always look for a Cinderella? Is there a big team you like to cheer for? How do you go about your fandom when it comes to the tournament watching?
I root for upsets.
Okay.
Doesn't, that's what I want. Upsets all around, upsets galore. As long as that happens, I'm good. But I'll root for Furman. I grew up, I went to several Furman football games for RAs at church. We would go up to Furman, had a great time, been to a couple concerts there at their little, theater room or whatever it may be called. So I have a little bit of an affinity for Furman, and Bob Ritchie's done a really good job there. I'll tell you, though, I was actually, full disclosure, I was rooting hard for East Tennessee State.
Okay. Why is that?
Their head coach is Brooks Savage. He went to Irmo. I don't want to say, so he's maybe a little bit slightly younger than my wife, but his dad was my wife's first basketball coach.
Okay.
When she came up.
Oh, how about that?
Yeah, so Brooks Savage was an assistant there, I think, was an assistant at Wake. Younger guy, does a really good job. Funny thing about Brooks Savage, too, if you watch him, he, especially from, like, the side profile, he looks a lot like Darren Horn.
Really?
The head coach. Yeah, it's kind of bizarre. But I was rooting hard for them to win and make the tournament. That was my team. They had a great win the day before against Western Carolina. They came back. Got a big basket at the end of the game, won, and I'm like, oh, here we go. They got a chance. But I'll root for Furman.
Yeah, sure. Bob Ritchie's pretty interesting, and I know, look, if they had not decided to retain Lamont Paris, and we'll get into that again coming up the top of the next hour, I think Bob Ritchie would have been the name at the top of a lot of people's list, considering the fact that he's already in state doing those things with Furman. I think he's going to be a pretty hot name in terms of, these head coaching openings that are happening. Boston College, Georgia Tech, Kansas State. There's more to come. We'll see what Oklahoma ends up doing with Porter Moser. We'll see what LSU ends up doing with McMahon and all that. There's going to be some big jobs coming open here that have already opened that need to be filled. And I imagine Bob Ritchie's going to be a popular name, especially if he's able to go out there and win another tournament game like they did last time they made it.
Yeah. He's been to, this is from Jamie Shaw of Rivals, been to 4 of the last 5 SoCon title games. He's won 2. He's won 114 games over the past 5 seasons, so he's at about a little over 68% win percentage in the SoCon. So he's certainly done a good job. He will be a guy, that gets some traction as a guy that could take that jump that we've seen so many take, just like Lamont Paris did, take a jump up to the next level when you have some success, especially like Tyler, if he goes and makes a little noise in the tournament, it seems like almost a lock that he'll have a chance to step up.
Yeah.
See it so often.
We're slowly filling out the bracket. Again, a lot of these mid-majors finishing up their conference tournament in the next day or so. Let's see, so far we've got Queens, High Point, Northern Iowa, Long Island, Tennessee State, Furman, North Dakota State, and Troy. Troy beat Georgia Southern last night as Southern was the 10 seed in the Sun Belt and led by none other than Spud Webb. No, not that Spud Webb, another Spud Webb.
Wow.
As they had a pretty cool story going there that obviously came to an end last night. But, yeah, it's really fun to – because, again, we don't obviously get a chance to lock into a lot of these smaller teams over the course of the season because we're paying so much attention to South Carolina. But, popping into these respective small conference tournaments and kind of learning about these teams and seeing who those potential Cinderellas could be. And I think they were making a really good point last night when you looked at the way that, Furman was constructed with size and everything like that they could be a team that could legitimately make some noise depending on who they draw up against in the tournament coming up here in about a week.
Here's another to get us along the same lines, but a little bit off that. Miami of Ohio, sitting there, still 31-0.
Should they get in?
Won the league. Should they get in? They're in the MAC tournament, obviously, right now. And with a chance to play spoiler, Frank Martin's UMass team on Thursday at 11 a.m., watch it on ESPN+. They've played UMass, obviously, a couple times this season. They won, Miami of Ohio won 86-77 in the last matchup. Had one of their closest games of the season in the first matchup, 86-84 win. If Frank Martin and UMass beats Miami of Ohio, do they get left out at 31-1? And, that's...
I would say I wouldn't choose to leave them out. A lot of the experts, so to speak, have not been favorable of them, considering the fact that their schedule is so weak. I think there's something to be said about not losing a single game, no matter how good or bad your schedule is. We'll see, but yeah, I guess if UMass is looking for a motivator, potentially ending a historic run for a team within your conference could be the thing they're known for this year.
It's just so fascinating because, they've been solidly in the top 25 for weeks. But then you look at those advanced metrics. This is as of Sunday night, so I'm not sure. The net, which is used by the NCAA for help for seeding, they had them at number 55. The Ken Palm had them number 91. And the biggest reason for that, of course, their strength of schedule, 274th out of 365 teams. Tyler, they played, I think you already went over this the other day. They have played Milligan, Mercyhurst, and they also played Indiana, but they played Indiana University East, which I did not know was a thing until just now,
not
5 seconds ago. Not the Hoosiers.
Yep.
I mean, the biggest wins are against, Akron and Kent State. So they're not beating. You can't go up and down and say, which tournament teams did they beat? None. But if you run the table, other than a conference, title game loss or a conference semi game loss, it's tough.
Yeah.
It's tough to keep a team out like that.
It is. Personally, I want to see them get in. Whether they win the MAC or not, I want to see them get in. And maybe the MAC has two bids if, Akron gets in by winning the conference and Miami of Ohio. But, again, I think basketball, especially with how long the season is, winning that many games is not easy no matter what the margin of victory is. So I'm rooting for Miami of Ohio to just win the tournament themselves so we don't have to have this stupid discussion. But we'll see what happens. And certainly I would take them getting in over Auburn at this point.
Auburn.
Yeah.
No.
We'll get back into Lamont Paris discussion coming up in the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here in the game. Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Ty Red and Chris Clark along with you. Wes Mitchell will be along in just a moment as we got a lot of things to dive into over the course of the next hour. Gamecock baseball back in action tonight as they take on Citadel. Talk about Alex Philpott as he gets set to make his first start as a Gamecock, as well as looking ahead to Pro Day, which is exactly 1 week from today. We'll be out there at the indoor facility watching everybody make their last impressions on NFL scouts before the draft coming up here in a little over a month's time. Also, next Tuesday is St. Patrick's Day, so I guess we have to be out there wearing green in accordance. I don't know if anybody's going to be pinching people there, but I guess better safe than sorry.
I guess so.
Yeah. So we'll get into that a little bit later on the hour. Also, I have a pop quiz for you and Wes at the end of the hour as well. So hopefully,
what is it related to? I won't do too much research or any.
Okay, it is related to transfer portal players. I'll just leave it at that.
Oh gosh,
so,
you're gonna ask us numbers, aren't you?
I can neither confirm nor deny this.
Okay.
So,
all right, be ready. Or probably not, but we'll try.
Wes didn't hear that, so you might have an opportunity to get a leg up on him.
Okay,
if you study accordingly. So we'll get into that a little bit later on in the hour. Again, news this morning coming out about an hour and a half ago that confirms what I think most of us were anticipating over the course of these past couple weeks, that Lamont Paris is indeed going to be returning to South Carolina as the head basketball coach for this upcoming season. Of course, they're playing tomorrow night in round 1 of the SEC men's tournament. So regardless of what happens, whether they win against Oklahoma or get blown out by 40 points, Lamont Paris is going to return coming up next year. I imagine that takes a little pressure off his shoulders. Now, again, I'm sure as conversation has been going on, he had a lot of insight of what was probably going to happen well before we heard about it this morning. But that's probably going to be a sense of calm for him going into tomorrow, knowing that he's not looking over his shoulder in this game like, oh, if I lose this game, what's going to happen to me? Like, imagine, I don't know if that allows him to coach more freely or not. What difference that make, we'll see. But I'm sure he'll be sleeping slightly better tonight, knowing that he's got at least another season here.
Well, or not even just, if I lose this game out, there'd probably still be if I win this game, if we don't win the whole tournament, so yeah, and look, yeah, you're absolutely right. The conversations, from my understanding, have been ongoing. So it's not, everybody's just sitting around and nobody knows what's happening. There's obviously been conversations throughout the season. Football last year's conversations throughout the season. Basketball, same deal. Conversations throughout the season, and then of course in the off season. I mean, we were talking about it in the last hour too. There's a lot to situate and figure out now that you know the direction that you're going in. Unless something just absolutely drastically changes last minute, you're not going to have, a head coaching search on your hand and all the different things that come with that. But you still have a lot to figure out on that front. You got to figure out NIL, which, again, that has been a huge part of the ongoing conversation. Everybody knows, yes, they need more. There's a path being created to figure out how do you get there. But then the other part that's really important to this, Tyler, is, how are you making sure that whatever you do spend, that you're more competitive than you have been, in terms of like a percentage, something we said last hour. Yeah, you were toward or at the bottom of the league last year, but there's still a feeling that you didn't maximize the roster construction. And so spending more money on the roster, yeah, that's a pretty obvious one. Mm-hmm. But you can also spend a whole bunch of money and still not get where you want to go. So what is the plan for everything else inside the program, from evaluations, roster construction, coaching? I don't think we're going to go into next year saying everything's the same except for they're spending more money on the roster. I highly doubt that's going to be the case.
Wes, as we bring you in the conversation here again, we've been talking about it off and on all morning that we do have confirmation that Lamont Paris is going to return to South Carolina as the head coach next year. Again, this isn't shocking to any of us who've been talking about it for the past couple weeks, but now it is confirmed. So regardless of what happens tomorrow or the rest of the week in the SEC tournament, that doesn't affect the future with Lamont Paris, and we know he's going to get a 5th year here at Carolina.
Yeah, as you said, Tyler, kind of confirms what was floating around out there, that this was trending towards a return. I think maybe the last 2 or 3 weeks, that was sort of what we were hearing. And so, yeah, I think for people, not a surprise, but you definitely are hearing some passionate responses to this. You're hearing, people kind of give their takes on what this means moving forward. And I do think it's going to be similar. As Chris just alluded to, a little bit similar to what happened with Shane Beamer in the offseason, where this wasn't just a matter of, hey, they need more NIL. That's the way to fix this. That's just going to magically. I think a lot of times people maybe think that's a magic wand. It's not. You look at South Carolina for football, all those wholesale changes on offense in terms of like a new coordinator, a bunch of new coaches on that side of the ball. You look at, yes, an increased, NIL budget. That's part of it. But then I think you also I even look at the fact that the football team brought in a guy like Rex Hogan, who, has that NFL background and is an additional person on staff to help you out with this evaluation piece. I do know this. I can tell you from things I've heard floating around, like leading up to this being official, South Carolina firmly does believe that if he has the right pieces, that Lamont Paris can coach. Like, they have not forgotten about his second year where he was SEC Coach of the Year. He took South Carolina to the tournament, showed you kind of the vision of what the program could be. Now, let's be honest, guys, that does not erase what has happened the last 2 years. The last 2 years has frankly just not been good enough. But, South Carolina, it appears, is going to make a move to try and do everything they can to build around Lamont Paris, give him one more opportunity, and see if he can take it and run with it going into next season.
Yeah, it's one of those things, the classic line of nothing changes if nothing changes, that if you keep doing the same thing over and over again with the same coach, yeah, the results probably aren't going to change all that much. But like you said, going back to what he did 2 years ago, there's a belief and a proof of concept to some degree that Lamont Paris can get you to that point. You just got to have the right, combination of resources and obviously talent on the roster to make that happen. So elevating your resources to what number, again, we don't know exactly. Hopefully that's more in the realm of what a lot of the other teams in the SEC are spending, and believing that they can go out there and find that right talent in addition to his coaching is going to be that right elixir to put you in the conversation for making the tournament a year from now. And that's the thing is, Carolina doesn't have to replicate 26 wins like they did 2 seasons ago and be playing for the SEC regular season title in the last week of the regular season against Tennessee like happened in 2024. But if we're entering the SEC tournament a year from now and Carolina's in that conversation of being in the NCAA tournament, or we already know that they're in, regardless of what happens in Nashville, then we say, okay, that's successful. Again, considering the historic precedent of what South Carolina men's basketball has been up to this point. Will they get there? We don't know. But that's kind of where you have to set your expectations of hope of, okay, can you be in that realm a year from now? And then that would extend Lamont Paris even further. Again, easier said than done, but that's kind of what you're shooting for.
Yeah, I think there's a few reasons that just saying, it's just NIL, a few reasons that's dangerous. Number one, I honestly don't know where the other, and maybe Wes, you might have some more to add here. That really good team that you just referenced a few years ago, we all know that you could not have constructed that team in 2026 or even 2025 or even the year before that. Like, you couldn't have constructed that team for that cost then. I don't know where South Carolina was, honestly, relative to the rest of the league that particular year. But I'm going to take a very educated guess that they were still not at the top even that year, and they finished second in the league and had a chance to win it in the last game and made the tournament. Now, if you're asking me, I am always a proponent of spend more because you got to invest. But that is not, like you said, that magic bullet. The other reasons that it's dangerous is one, you just have to deploy the funds correctly. We're sitting here talking about Kentucky, and how they haven't had so far the type of season that they've wanted, despite having one of the highest payrolls in the country. You got to do all of it together. The other reason is, you're sitting here this offseason planning, okay, what are we going to spend in NIL? And we've seen this movie so many times before in multiple sports. You make a plan, and then the market hits, and you go, oh, man, we undervalued things. We don't have enough. The numbers have gone up. And I think that will probably happen, but also, teams are spending so much in other sports, namely football. Like, what is the market going to look like in hoops? Will it actually settle like a little bit, or will it double again from what it was this year? I don't think either would really surprise me, but that's why you have to make sure that, you have to come up with a plan. At some point, you have to come up with a budget of what you're going to spend. You have to do that in a smart way, but you got to make sure that you change everything else around that to optimize how you can build this roster with what you do have in terms of funding.
Well, guys, how much is the number of teams that have just pushed, all their chips into the table on football? And I think there's a part of you that says, hey, this is big boy athletics. Like, it seems like whenever you hear things like, there's not going to be the money in that, it just magically finds a way to be there. And so, for some of these schools, does it truly, is it truly a situation where things get reset, the market kind of evens out or levels out a little bit, or does it continue to, go up exponentially? I would say in my opinion, I don't think it's going to continue to rise at the rate that it has. Like you look back at that Talon Cooper, BJ Mack class that South Carolina had, very much kind of, in my opinion, similar to the South Carolina football class where you were able to get like a Demetrius Knight, a Kyle Kennard. This was like right before the dollars just exploded in those particular sports. And so South Carolina, to give them credit, they did very much increase the resources for men's basketball going into this past season. And, to Chris's point, part of it is about how do you use those resources? How do you pick the players you're going to go get? That's a fair argument. But also, as South Carolina increased the support, the resources, the other schools did the exact same. So how do you get, I think the big thing for Carolina is, can you get to a point where, like, you're not going to be Kentucky, right? Like, you're not going to be, I don't think you're going to be Florida or Arkansas either. Those are two of the other ones that seem to be spending more than anybody else, with Kentucky spending the absolute most in the SEC. Can you get it, though, more around whenever somebody gets these leaked numbers and they put out, they do the math, hey, here's the average SEC roster value, basically, which is like, hey, this is what was spent on this roster. Can you get it to where you're kind of just in line with the rest of the league, like you're average? I think at a place like South Carolina, to be completely frank, completely fair, that's what you're going to look for from a resources standpoint, and then you're going to hope that you can build a product where you can compete on a year-to-year basis, and then every few years you can go to the tournament and make a run.
We'll get to the point, and I can't remember if it was Chris or Jack that brought this up earlier, get to the point where when Field of 68 polls anonymous coaches in your conference, they don't talk about you being the worst job, and resources have a lot to do with that. And again, like Wes said, being Kentucky and spending $20 million on the roster every single year is probably not a point that South Carolina is going to be getting to, certainly not anytime soon, but being competitive, being somewhere in that middle ground with a lot of the other teams that are at least competitive and competing for tournament spots on an annual basis is kind of what you're shooting for. And again, we're not the ones writing the checks, and hopefully the ones that are going to be able to do that.
You don't have to be at the top. You can't be at the bottom. I think we can all agree on that. Like, you are not going to be at the top. You kind of have to face that. South Carolina's not going to be at the top relative to maybe some other SEC schools, some other schools nationally in football. Don't have to be at the top, just can't be at the bottom. And so you have to find that sweet spot of what is it going to take to invest in what we need to win, and then how can you put together the plan to make sure that you're deploying those funds in an intelligent way that's going to help you build that team.
Until we get an alumni that's an oil billionaire, then we can have a different conversation.
That's right.
But we're not there yet. We'll switch gears, talk about some baseball coming up next. They're in action tonight, taking on the Citadel, and we get to see the debut of Alex Philpott. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs here on the game. Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. It's our West Metro Chris Clark with you here on your Tuesday on the Game. That Paul Maneri yesterday joining Scott Hamilton on the post-game show, talking about keeping his team confident. And, you know, I know everybody was pretty down a week and a half ago after the series loss to Clemson, and we knew that there were still 6 more games to play between then and going on the road to Gainesville to start SEC play coming up this weekend against Florida. And to their credit, they've handled their business up to this point. 5-0 in those games. Still got a game tonight coming up against Citadel. Winning this game and being 6-0 in those midweeks in the 6 games between Clemson and Florida doesn't instill all the confidence in the world that suddenly you're going to go out there and win all your SEC conference games, but it makes you feel better than going out there and losing half of them, right? So there is something to be said about going out there and doing your job, which for the past week his team has done and hopefully can continue to do tonight.
You might have had an idea of where South Carolina was going to be after 18 games or so, or 17, 18 games. You probably didn't pencil in some of the 3 losses that they've had. Maybe you had them in a different order. You were certainly hopeful you could beat Clemson in the series. Didn't get that done, but given what we saw the week before, where you have a really, really bad loss to Queens, you lose the series disappointingly to Clemson after winning game 1 and you couldn't get it done. You'll take the 5 wins that you got. If you can beat the Citadel, you'll take the 6 wins in a row. Now, that doesn't mean you start giving out trophies, of course. There is a recognition that things are absolutely going to get harder, but you look around the league. Again, LSU, ranked number 2, lost the series to Sacramento State. Florida, who you play next, just lost the series. No transitive property. You're going to have to go out and get it done. But I don't think this is a team where, you say, hey, they are what they are at this point. Are there some concerns? Absolutely. You'll take those 5 wins, hopefully for them, 6 if you can beat the Citadel. And you're starting to see some guys maybe settle into roles, You've seen some improvements among players. We touched on those earlier this week. Logan Sutter really heating up. Your pitching staff, it seems like you're maybe you're starting to find some comfort, some roles. You are getting Philpott back. He'll be, I think, very limited in this start. But if you can get him back and he can become a consistent performer for you, he certainly is a talented guy, then you never know what will happen. You weren't feeling great after the Clemson series, after the stretch that you had just seen. You're not going to feel great after winning these games, but it beats the heck out of the alternative, right?
Sure.
Because these are the types of games, frankly, that we've seen South Carolina lose in the earlier part of the season.
Yeah, no doubt. And, guys, I'm looking forward to watching Philpott pitch tonight. Like, this is a kid who, didn't have the best numbers in terms of ERA at Florida, but is a big dude, 6'6", over 200 pounds, throws hard, had really good strikeout numbers in Gainesville. And, like Chris said, you're not going to see a lot of him tonight, but just to be able to get him back on the mound, let him go through the routine, let him go out there and, kind of you hope maybe this can be like a see the ball go through the hoop, like maybe hit your layups type situation, pitch. I mean, you're probably looking at 1 or 2 innings at most, I think, but I think for him, it'd be awesome for not just him, but for this team, if he could go out there, go through that process. And then really the thing you're going to be looking at from that point forward is what does the recovery look like? Does he feel good after making a start, kind of getting up, getting down, all those things? And obviously he's going to need to be a big part of this thing if South Carolina is going to ultimately have this team that they want to have.
Well, and another guy I think we should shout out to, Brandon Stone. He's one of those guys that's sort of hitting his stride again. Like everything we say right now is at the caveat of you're not an SEC player. We all know that, right? You're just playing the schedule that's in front of you and hoping to take care of business. And since the Clemson series, very short stretch, they've done that, which again beats the heck out of the alternative. Stone, he's thrown 18 innings this season, a 1 flat ERA. His strike to walkout ratio is really good. He's got 20 strikeouts, 4 walks, and opponents are hitting less than 230 against him. So he's been a bright spot. He's a guy that it seems like the staff can trust to go in there, give you some innings in relief. He was a guy that was in the mix for one of those starter roles, but he's been really good in that role. And so, got him going a little bit, it seems like, going into conference play. Philpott's back. Like, you can try to start to create a path in your head of, okay, maybe if this team can get some wins early in conference play, they can get it turned around. But they're going to have an immediate test. Florida, despite darn near getting swept by High Point, it's a nationally ranked team that has still they went into the weekend with a really good record, and they're very, very talented. We've seen some of those Florida teams they're always so talented, and we've seen them hit their stride late. Maybe that'll be the case for them. So be a big challenge to start with here.
Well, and going to your point there about Brandon Stone, and again, he did have to be put into the weekend rotation to start the season in the fallout of the Jake McCoy injury, but he does seem to kind of have found his place when it comes to being in that relief role and bringing back a guy like Alex Philpott, who, again, just going to be the opener for tonight. Again, maybe going an inning or two, depending on how many pitches he can get to coming up tonight. But he's somebody that Maneri's talked about being possibly factoring into that weekend rotation. So, as you get through this weekend, won't be ability to start this weekend, but could come in relief. But as you look to Arkansas, Georgia, these series coming up, if, say, a Riley Goodman is struggling, you could potentially move a guy like Alex Philpott into that starting rotation, which would allow you to leave guys like Stone in that relief role that he's pitching in so well. So, again, it just adds more depth. Cullen Horwitz, another guy coming over from Sanford that's been out up to this point that is also primed to come back soon. Don't know exactly when. Maybe it's tonight. Maneri didn't give any specifics on that, but you're starting to get a little bit more depth back into your pitching a room, which is obviously good, and you're going to need that to survive in conference play.
Well, and I think, guys, a lot of people, myself included, probably our minds went to the worst when you heard that Philpott is hurt, and it was on the heels of the Jake McCoy news. And, injuries to pitchers is just, it's an epidemic in baseball right now. So I think we all were kind of like, well, that might be it for this year for Philpott. So just the fact that it seems going to be able to work back from it. We'll see how tonight goes. Could be a major bonus for this rotation and for this staff. And, I don't know. I don't know if Gamecock fans quite feel that hope yet that we talked about going into the year. Like, can you build some hope? Can you give them a reason to get to the park? Can you give them a reason to want to follow this team? I don't think we're there yet. I think the Clemson series still, looms very large for South Carolina fans, but at least you have started to see, maybe if you squint, some visions of possibly being a pretty good team. I think continuing the kind of momentum they have right now, getting that 6th win in a row before you go on the road to Gainesville would be massive for this group of guys.
Again, first pitch coming up tonight at 7 o'clock. Pregame coverage starting at 6:45 right here on 107.5 The Game. We'll get into some football conversation on the other side. 1 week away from Pro Day. Who's going to be taking part in it? We'll talk about that coming up next. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on The Game. All right, welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tired Wes Mitchell and Chris Clark along with you here on your Tuesday on the game. A week from today, we're going to be out at South Carolina Pro Day for not only the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour and the Extra Point, but also the Garnet Trust Hour presented by our friends over at Krantz Cooling, Heating, and Plumbing. And before we get into the list of who's going to be working out at Pro Day next week, Chris, as always, we want to remind our friends, or remind everybody about our friends over at Krantz Cooling, Heating, and Plumbing.
Yep, Krantz Cooling, Heating, and Plumbing. You heard about them last hour. Garnet Trust Hour presenting sponsor. They have been for a while. We appreciate all those guys. Justin Krantz, their GM, does a great job. Hear about him on the baseball broadcast, too, all the time. KrantzCooling.com, Krantz, cooling with a K.com. Y'all have heard us, Wes, myself. We've had them out to the house to help take care of our HVAC needs, heating, cooling. They've done a great job at both of our homes, but also added in plumbing now. So Krantz Cooling, Heating, and Plumbing, all of your residential and commercial HVAC needs, plus now plumbing, same great service. Looking forward to hearing more about that as we continue to go. KrantzCooling.com. If you're in need, make sure you check them out.
And again, that'll be a part of our show next week when we're out at Pro Day over there at the indoor facility. Real quick, got to run through the participants for Pro Day next week. Oscar Attaway, Nick Barrett, Jared Brown, Colin Bryant, Brandon Cisse, Damon Clowney, Jordan Dingle, Bradley Dunn, Rashul Faison, Chadias Gear, Monkel Goodwine, Jalen Kilgore, Ronnie Porter, Eric Rice, DQ Smith, and Brian Thomas Jr. All the guys are going to be participating next week. Of course, much like, at the NFL Combine, there's a couple of those guys that were there that are going to garner the most attention, and Brandon Cisse obviously going to be the biggest focal point, as he didn't run the 40 at the NFL Combine the other week, and we'll be running that next week. And that's, again, something that can just kind of further solidify him for what could be a late first-round pick, as he's projected by a lot of people as, again, guys, he just could potentially add to that list of successful DBs to go from South Carolina to the NFL.
Cisse is a really interesting draft projection because I've always been high on him as a player. When he got to South Carolina, I thought he played very well. I'll admit I was a little, when you start to see the first-round mocks, I was like, man, wow, okay. And so I dug into it a little bit, and I'm not trying to throw water on it at all. He's not one of those first-round lock types. I talked to somebody who normally has a pretty good feel for these things in the NFL scouting community who thought, he could end up being like a third-round pick. Now, here's the key. It's exactly what you said, Tyler. Does he run at Pro Day? Has he said for sure, like, I'm going to run?
I thought that's what, when he didn't run at the combine, it was like, oh, he's going to run at Pro Day. That's the way that I understood it.
He is going to run.
He is going to run. Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
So his time is going to be, I think, really crucial. And that same person I spoke to said, hey, I've kind of got in my mind that he may run in this certain range. But if he runs really well, then that's your conversation of him being that later first, like solid second round type pick. If he goes down there and puts down a 4.45, 4.49, something like that, that I think is really, really going to help his case because he's a versatile player in terms of can play nickel, can play corner, can play special teams. He's extremely smart. And he put down some really good tape at South Carolina and at NC State. So I think teams want to see how well will he run, because the testing that he did at the combine, broad jump, vertical, he did really well in those categories. I think he was top 4, top 5 among all the DBs or all the corners in that category. Teams are really going to be paying attention to that 40 and how well he runs, and I think that could end up being a pretty sizable shift for him in terms of solidifying his position or just helping vault him up higher. I think he's one of those guys that's being mocked maybe a little bit higher than he's currently thought of, although it just takes one team. If he can run well, that'll help him a ton.
Well, guys, I think even for him to go and measure in at exactly 6 feet, instead of the 5'11", instead of 5'10", you don't always know, are these guys listed at their actual height, and you see different heights out there. For him to actually go be a 6-footer, that was actually one of the questions for him out of high school, especially when you look at the fact we know how much Torian Gray puts into length as one of the things he looks at when he's evaluating prospects. So out of high school, there were some questions about the length. I think he's I don't know if he's grown since then or what, but for him to actually be 6 feet is, actually, I think a pretty big deal. And, the other thing to Chris's point, like we are in terms of the lead up to the actual draft, we are very firmly in like the window where everything is hyped up. Like, remember this time last year, the buzz was, hey, Nicky Mawari, what he did at the combine is one of the best combine performances of all time by the numbers. And you're going, oh, this guy may get into the top 15, top 10 potentially. And even Nick, was not a first round pick. So the standard, like the number of things that have to go right for you to be, and it's not just be one of the top 32 players. You got to be a fit for the right team. There's got to be the right need. All these things have to come together. So, it would take a lot, I think, for him to be a first round pick. But if he goes out here and runs a 4.37 or something, then all of a sudden you look at all the other boxes that he has checked, and somebody somewhere is going to take a shot on him probably pretty high because teams that value the football IQ, the character, the what am I getting in my room in terms of leadership and work ethic, all those things. Teams that value that are absolutely going to love this guy. So I think there are a lot of boxes that have already been checked, and even the fact I think he maybe is best suited to end up being like a Captain Munnerlin in the NFL, like maybe just a true nickel back. And I think he's someone we could look back on and say, hey, he found a role on the right team and the right scheme playing some nickel and then spent, 8 years in the league or something.
By the way, speaking of Nicky Mawari, I think it was after the Super Bowl, or leading up to the Super Bowl, they were asking a bunch of guys of, hey, what college players you're looking at or who you endorse. And despite the fact that he never played with Brandon Cisse, he did say, oh, I'm looking at Cisse, got to keep an eye on. So you got the endorsement from the last guy out of that defensive back room that's obviously gone on to have a lot of success in the NFL. And again, that's going to be kind of much like Mawari a year ago, our focal point as we talk about the draft and lead up to that coming up here in a little over a month.
Yeah, that was cool. Little brotherhood. South Carolina, they churn out some DBs.
Which I'm sure they've interacted, a little bit, but they didn't play with
each other.
Pretty well, I think.
Yeah. So that was
that is
neat to see.
That is Tom Brady's defensive rookie of the year.
That's right. Yeah,
Nicky Moore.
Get it right.
The league didn't recognize it, but I'll take the Tom Brady evaluation over anybody's there. So yeah, great year for Nick, obviously winning the Super Bowl, and can't wait to see him in year number 2, and obviously excited to see where Cisse goes and what he does next week at the at Pro Day as well. We'll continue to talk about this more, certainly what these other guys are expected to do and all that as well. But coming up next to wrap up the hour, I told Chris about this earlier, so be wary, Wes. There is a pop quiz to wrap up the show, so be prepared for that on the other side. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs, on your Tuesday on the Game. Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West and Chris with you wrapping up the show here on your Tuesday on the game. Again, Gamecock baseball in action tonight, taking on the Citadel. Your next chance to win the Crescent Construction Grand Slam contest this morning on the early game, by the way. They gave away $425 to a lucky winner for being entered in the contest after Talmadge Leroy's Grand Slam from Sunday night's game against Princeton. So the amount resets to $25, and it'll go up by $25 each and every game. So, again, go to 1075game.com and register if you've not already for the Crescent Construction Grand Slam contest, and you could be the lucky winner the next time a Gamecock hitter goes yard with the bases loaded. As I mentioned a moment ago, it's pop quiz time. I know we're very early into spring practice. You guys have only gotten one viewing window so far. How well did you remember the jersey numbers that you saw? Wes, you feel confident about this?
Oh, man, Tyler, I pride myself on this one. I got to be honest with the people, though. Not feeling confident yet. Like, I don't know what to expect, to be honest with you. Like, normally if you said, hey, I'm going to throw these at you, if you gave me 5 of them, I would think I'd probably maybe get 4 of them right.
Okay.
I could anticipate potential embarrassment coming up, to be completely honest with you.
Now, would you guys like the number or the name? What would you prefer me do here?
I was wondering what you would do there. You can do either. You can even mix them up.
I mean, mix it up? Okay.
Yeah, I'm good with one. Yeah.
I have 9 total here.
Oh, boy. Here we go.
Now, there is one number that has 2 guys. And this is all transfer portal players, no freshmen, only portal players. 2 players do share the same number coming in from the portal. So I'll let you know when we get to that number.
How are we going to do? Is it first to ring in? Are you going to just say, hey, Wes, do you know this one? Hey, Chris.
What would you prefer me alternate? You guys want to go like?
Yeah, let's see if we can alternate.
Okay.
That way, yeah.
All right.
And just in case Wes knows all of them first.
Well, and let's say if it's my turn and I don't get it, then you just pass it to Chris. And
okay, like Family Feud.
Pass.
Yeah, type
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
All right,
Okay.
all right. All right, we'll start with Wes.
Okay.
Number 83.
Oh, okay. That is my guy, DJ Black.
That is correct. DJ Black is number 83.
Ding.
All right.
I'll do the dings.
Chris, we'll start with Hank Purvis.
Ooh, Hank Purvis. He is 52.
He is 52. That is correct. All right, you guys so far 2 for 2. All right. Wes, we'll go with Emmett Rhodes.
Oh, golly.
Long snapper. Long snapper numbers.
What? I have no idea. So bad radio. I'm not going to just him and Hall. Give me, 60.
Not 60. Chris, you want to guess?
He's got a. Oh,
Is
I
it
guess
49?
It's 48.
48 is correct.
Yeah.
Close. There you go.
For some reason, after I said it, 49 popped in my head.
It's a good snapper number. Good
Okay.
guess.
48, 49 are definitely like, was Drew Williams back in the day?
I think he was 47.
Oh,
right.
okay. Sorry, Chris.
Sorry, Drew.
All right, Chris, how about 69?
Oh, that's easy.
Is it?
Yeah, it's Kojo Poku.
Kojo Poku is number 69. All right, you guys doing pretty
You
good.
could not miss Poco. Let me just add in a little
You
commentary.
can't miss him.
You could not miss my guy out there at spring practice. day
Human
one.
eclipse.
All right, Wes, how about Christian Clark, the other Chris Clark?
The other Chris Clark is rocking Chipper Jones's number 10.
That is correct. Number 10 for the other Chris Clark. All right, here, got a couple more. Chris, we'll go with number 80.
Oh, man. Am I going to be the first to miss one? Transfer number 80. Okay. So it's not DJ Black. I don't think it's Charlie Mullally. And then Nitro's 1 and Jaden Gibson's 9. 80. Oh, Max Drag.
Max Drag is number 80.
I had to work my way through that one.
All right, let's see here. And Wes, Dane Arnett.
Oh, man. Dane Arnett, 75.
Boom.
75 is correct. All right, now here is the number. I'm going to just open this up for both of you. So whoever answers it first gets it right. The number 27 is shared by 2 transfer portal players.
I got it.
So they're obviously not on the same side of the football. Who are the 2 players wearing number 27?
Is Drew Collins and Upton Bellafant.
Boom.
Man, we did pretty good on that, Wes. Yeah. I'm proud of us.
Yeah, I am too.
Yeah, that was better than I thought.
Oh.
Now that was only scratching the surface. Should I keep doing this to see how well you guys do with the entire transfer portal and freshman class?
Yeah, keep going.
Okay.
Another day?
Another
right
day.
now.
Yeah, we'll work that in for right now.
You'll give us time to study?
We got 90 seconds left, so I'm not going to throw any more at you, but pretty good for one evaluation period.
I feel like I know the transfer numbers a little bit better than like if you start throwing out freshman numbers, I'd be like, I've got no idea. You know, those are, I don't know why.
Did we have anybody change numbers this year?
Well,
last year?
Yeah,
Yes.
like Jalewis Solomon was not wearing 42 last year.
No.
Right? Like he's wearing 42 this year. It's kind of a
Odd.
like
Kelvin
a throwback
Hunter.
corner number. Yeah. Kelvin Hunter, different.
Kelvin
number.
Hunter was 21 last year, wasn't he?
Yep, he sure was.
Okay.
Now that's, I think, Jabri Coleman and Chris Hatfield, I think.
Yep, that's right.
So
I guess
hey,
we know
Tyler,
the numbers a little bit better than I thought.
Next time, entire roster.
Oh, entire roster.
Ooh.
Like
Okay.
we're not going to go through the entire roster, but you can pull from the entire roster.
Okay, yeah, I can do that. Yeah, we'll we can try that. We'll see. This can be our next competition that we keep up with is which one to use best at naming numbers on the roster. And we'll see. But what is it next Wednesday? The next time you guys will be able to get out there for practice? Is that correct?
Yep, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
not much going on this week. And again, to get out there next week and get some more evaluations and hear from Beamer and company as well. And again, we'll be out there at Pro Day coming up next Tuesday. But that'll do it for the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Coming up next, it's the halftime show. Myself and Bill going to get back to the latest on Lamont Paris returning for South Carolina next year. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour here in the game.
All right, guys, every time I talk to the team over at Integrated Media, Michael, Nathan, I learn something new about some cool stuff that they're doing. I've already told you many times about how they've been out of my home, Wes's home. They can make all your audio, visual, and tech dreams come true, of course, and they can still do that. Here's something new that's on my radar. They're doing a lot of conference room upgrades right now. So if you're a business owner, utilize a conference room like a lot of businesses. If you do video conferencing on Zoom, on Teams, on Meets, they can help you with all of that. I go into so many conference rooms where they're having a tough time setting it up. The technology's not good. Make sure that's not you. Video conferencing options